Sometimes it's simpler if you limit the options a user can use. So as default, you can control 3 switches on SIP side and 3 switches on the puff side with breath. That can seem too many, especially when you're starting to use the device. And you can see this one's powered up, and it's showing you've only got 2 yellow options. So if I sip and puff, I can only select S1 or P1. Nothing else is made available to me. And that can be a useful starting point to get used to the device. To configure a breath master to have limited number of switch outputs from breath, you do this. You power the device down, you plug 2 switches into left and right, you hold these switches on, and whilst holding them on, power up the breath master. And once it's booted, you'll see you've got a flashing display. One switch will allow you to select the SIP options, so let's allow 2 on the SIP side, and the other switch will allow you to select the puff options, so we'll allow 3 on the puff side. And then if you power the device down, I'm going to unplug the switches to make the display seem simpler, and power it back up again. You will now see that we have only S1 and S2 available, but we can control P1, P2, P3 switches. And if I sip and puff, that's all we get in the SIP side. But we have all 3 available on the puff side. We can also restrict the number of the switch outputs available to the joystick. By default, you can see we can select all 6 switches in a kind of circular pattern. That can be too many for some users. So the way we do that is we have the joystick mode switch connected, connect the other 2, the left and right switches as well, and hold all 3 switches on and power the breath master up. Once it's powered up, we can control what's available to the joystick just using the mode switch. You can see all 6 options are flashing, and we know we're controlling the joystick options because we're also getting a flashing LEDs on the bottom where the joystick status is. And if I press the mode switch, we can select just have 2 options or 4 options or all options. And if I simplify it to just 1, that will be S1 and P1 switch outputs only. Power the breath master down, and then when it powers back up again and we operate the joystick, you'll find that we only have the P1 and S1 options, and they are controlled by north and south actions in this case. Nothing else will work. For some users, it's beneficial to have the SIP set more sensitive than puff, or the puff more sensitive than SIP. The blue knob here sets the general sensitivity of SIP and puff. To make that imbalance, you do this. You turn this little potentiometer down to minimum, which is fully anti-clockwise, sort of 7 o'clock position, and then the display will change. And at the moment we've got 2 white LEDs on each side, so that shows us that the SIP sensitivity is set the same as the puff sensitivity. I have also 2 switches connected, and the left switch will let me increase the sensitivity on the SIP side whilst decreasing it on the puff side, and the right switch will let me do the opposite, up to 5 steps. When you've set it to a level you want to test, turn the general sensitivity pot back to where you were or where you want to try, and that's it configured. When the device powers up next time, you'll get a snapshot of that setting, so it'll time out as normal. Then for about a second it will illustrate what the differential sensitivity has been set to. In video 3 we looked at commands, and commands are to do with reallocating the switch input to an output, and it's actually to do with actioning the triggers LT and RT and connecting them to SIP and puff. In the example in video 3, it was a case of reallocating the switch input to another output, and if you recall, the commands start by a full SIP and you've got a green LED, and then pressing the button we can step through commands 1, 2, 3 and 4. So command 1, the green LED does nothing. Command 4 does nothing. They just act as flags at the end. Command 2 in video 3 showed you how to reallocate the switch. You can, without a switch, commands are still possible, but it operates on a time basis. So if I go to maximum SIP, you'll see automatically without the switch it will step through the command. And if I released SIP, then on a particular pattern, that's the command that would happen. Command 3 is to connect SIP to the left trigger. So let's do that. Now we see that it's all dim white. That indicates that I now am connected to the left trigger in an analog way, and it's exactly the same for the right trigger using puff. Now we have a setup with two switches, a left switch and a right switch connected to their default outputs. I have a joystick and I have a joystick mode switch. And then I'm going to show you how we can easily reallocate these input switches to different outputs, and it's very simple. If you use a joystick to action an output, say S1, whilst holding that output, if I hit the joystick mode button, you'll see that the switch has now been allocated to S1. So it's very easy to reallocate the output switches to what you want using the joystick. During the joystick mode selection, when the display is showing the 4 colors, additional functions are also available to do with the analog outputs, the triggers LT and RT. And it works like this. If I SIP specifically during this phase, then it's automatically allocated the left analog trigger to SIP. If I go back into the mode selection phase, I can turn it back off again with another SIP. So it toggles on and off. And it's exactly the same on the puff side. In addition, the switches have more functions that are also related to the left trigger and right trigger during specifically the joystick mode selection phase. And the left button will swap the two functions around. So at the minute we have the left trigger connected to puff and the right trigger's not on. If during this phase I push the left button, you can see it's now swapped, and I've now got left trigger active and the right trigger inactive. If I do it again, it will swap it back. And the right button will, no matter what, turn all trigger outputs off. So to reiterate, SIP and puff will let you turn either left trigger or right trigger on, connected to breath, and the buttons, the left button will swap whatever condition the triggers are in, and the right button will always turn the triggers off.